Yes, feminism is so important. Of course it is. But if your feminism doesn't include other identities such as race and class and sexuality and gender, it's not really worth having that conversation. It needs to be intersectional, all-encompassing.
Hello and welcome back to my podcast. I'm Bianca Taylor, and today I want to talk about feminism because it is such an important topic, and I feel like I've touched on it in other episodes in bits and pieces because it is really one of the motives of my podcast and my messages. And so I thought, who better to have this conversation with than one of my best friends who's a returning guest on my podcast, MariaLuisa Ferro, who is a life coach and also director of programs at latech.org. So thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
For anybody who doesn't know, this is how we talk to each other. She doesn't talk like that all the time.
No, I don't. I talk like this. But what a lovely intro. And thank you for that because feminism is such an important topic. So thank you for having me on for this
Of course.
topic.
You're one of the most well-versed people that I know in this subject. I know that you, it's what you studied in school, right?
Similar, yeah. I studied actually global politics at the LSE, at the London School of Economics, but that was mainly because I just liked that title. But sneakily, I chose all my modules were in like gender and development and gender studies, and even my whole thesis was kind of on the topic of around the topic of like kind of feminism and the importance of being kind of an intersectional feminist, especially when it comes to sex workers.
Perfect, because that's exactly what we are going to dive into today. And before anybody who feels uncomfortable with the word feminism tunes out, or maybe you don't, identify with it and you think that that's not for you, I really invite you to stay and listen because it is such an important topic. Feminism does not mean that we are excluding men. We need to overpower them in any way. And I've been on my journey as a feminist for the past couple of years. Prior to that, I don't really know what I thought about feminism. I just really didn't think about it a whole lot. I definitely understood what sexism was, but it wasn't until I was on social media and being attacked in my own comment section for how I showed up online that I realized that there was such a difference in the way that I was treated online versus the way my partner Nima was treated online, even though we're both fitness people showing a lot of our bodies, and he would be constantly praised for being completely shirtless. And if I was in a bikini or a sports bra or what have you, or did a sexy modeling photo, I would get slut shamed. And that was actually what drove me to understand feminism. And I started reading different books, and I read We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Adichie, and that book changed my life. And I then asked Nimai to read it, and he started his journey as a feminist as well, and he's still always learning. And so before we get into what that topic is, what's your journey as a feminist been like? Like, when did it start for you? I know it started early.
So young. I think I briefly mentioned this on the last podcast, but I was very lucky and very fortunate to have a mother who explained everything. Like, I was like, oh, what's that? And she wouldn't just give me a one-word answer or say, I don't know. She would research in a lot of detail what that was, whatever it is. And she also was very knowledgeable around kind of different systems of oppression. And so she was really good at explaining to me these different how women and men get treated differently, and pointing it out and kind of showing me these things. And so I kind of learned very early on, like, oh, there's such an imbalance in our society. And even just being, it's like the word feminism as well, it's like that's the political movement behind it, but as women we can't help but experience the misogyny that comes with being a woman, even from when you're like really little.
Like 3 years old.
Yeah, exactly. And just saying that certain things are available for boys and not for you, and that's not for you, and this is for them, and so much more is available for them. Or even small things like, be careful. You know, parents tell their girls a lot more to be careful, don't take risks, be careful than their little boys. And so it really started very early on. And then I think the political side of it and me getting more interested in it kind of politically or academically, definitely when I was a teenager, and I started to just really understand kind of history behind certain movements and everything. And then at university for sure, and then in my master's even more for sure, where I learned the importance of something like intersectional feminism, like learning that the suffragettes, right, the women's movement to getting equal voting for men and for women in the 1920s were extremely racist, you know, and really key things like that I missed out on understanding that actually, yes, feminism is so important, of course it is, but if your feminism doesn't include other identities such as race and class and sexuality and gender, it's not really worth having that conversation. It needs to be intersectional, all-encompassing.
Yeah. And the reason why this thought came up to have this podcast now is because I told you, I've been into a show called Minx lately. It's a new HBO show, and that show is just everything about my vibe. Takes place in the 1970s, which everyone knows is my favorite aesthetic. And it's about feminism and the porn industry. And in the show, the main character, Joyce, she was like a radical feminist her whole life, very well educated. She wanted to start this magazine called The Matriarchy Awakens, and nobody would give her a shot, you know, until this one pornography publisher gave her a shot. But he was like, we're going to take your messages, but we're going to put it in a magazine for women, a porn magazine for women, and include like naked photos of men for the first time. And then the magazine, you know, blows up, and she starts having all these interviews. And at one point in one of the most recent episodes, spoiler if you watched the show, maybe just fast forward a couple of seconds, but she's in New York and she's visiting some of her friends that she went to school with, and they are also very well educated feminists, and they're sitting around the dinner table and they're talking about, in such a judgmental fashion, about the women in the porn industry. And now that Joyce has been emerged in the porn industry for however many months they've been building the magazine, she's built friendships and relationships, and she's seen that these women are real women who just love their body and are comfortable with their body, and they all have different journeys as to why they got into sex work. And so she's sitting at the dinner table, and these other women are saying, oh, well, women only get into porn when they don't have any other options, or they're a runaway, or they're a single mother. And she starts saying, well, actually they're just like us. They just are really comfortable with their bodies. And they just completely shut her down and kind of laugh at her. And I thought that was just such an amazing thing to see on TV, to see. I haven't seen it. Maybe it exists in other movies that I haven't seen yet, but I have not seen on TV or in movies such a clear example of why intersectional feminism is so important. And just especially when it comes to sex work and women against other women within the own movement of feminism. And it's something that I've experienced because I will be celebrating my body or my sexuality or my expression, and I get comments from women saying, this doesn't empower women. You're hurting the movement. And I'm like, no, I'm not. So anyways, I saw this and I was like, okay, we have to have this conversation, because I don't think people realize how important intersectional feminism is. So can you shed a little bit of light, since you're so educated on the topic, what that means, like feminism and intersectional feminism?
Sure. So, I mean, you've painted it so well with that kind of example there, but essentially feminism, which really was spearheaded in the kind of 1960s. I mean, it's been going on for hundreds of years, of course, but really was really spearheaded in the 1960s. And a lot of those kind of old school feminists are exactly that. It's predominantly white feminists, white, well-educated feminists that have a kind of view of feminism as literally fighting against the patriarchy, fighting against misogyny, and viewing it as kind of just literally taking into consideration gender. That's it, nothing else. So, it's just very much women against men. the issue with that predominantly is that you then completely negate all other really important identities, as I said earlier, like race and like class. Like, for example, my experience as a white facing, I know it's kind of different in America. A lot of Italians don't consider themselves white, but I do. White presenting, I've experienced a lot of white privilege in my life. My experience is that as someone who grew up very privileged, someone who was afforded education, all of this is extremely different from someone who is a person of color, is trans, is a completely different identity as me, or so I think so with that, it's basically saying that this is the feminine experience, the woman experience of being a woman, and like everything else is not part of that experience. Mm-hmm. So that's why a lot of old school feminists, right, are extremely transphobic and won't consider trans women as women, mm-hmm. and it's all surrounded around, can you give birth? In which case then you're a woman, mm-hmm. and we're fighting against it. But then not like this, not like that. So in the late 80s, early 90s, one of my favorite academics of all time, and she's actually based in LA, hopefully one day I'll get to meet her, it's Kimberly Crenshaw. She coined the term intersectional feminism, basically saying you have to take into account all these other identities, or else it just simply doesn't work, and actually it hurts it a lot more, right? Mm-hmm. Feminists who are, for example, anti-sex work are hurting the movement a lot more, because again, it creates a huge divide, mm-hmm. and doesn't create the common goal of it. And then it actually created such a big divide that, I can't remember her surname. I think it's Clenora Hudson or something. She even in the mid-90s coined the term womanism. And that was a big movement specifically for Black feminists to be like, I have nothing to do with this movement of feminism. So they completely almost rejected the term feminism and went to womanism and said, we're all encompassing. We are all about, understanding our experience from our side, and not that none of this like white feminist upper class bullshit privilege crap. So yes, so that's why nowadays, and I'm really happy that kind of the term intersectional feminism is becoming more and more used, and kind of understanding that's what it's all encompassing. It's, yes, of course we're fighting the patriarchy, but it's about us fighting the patriarchy together and understanding different people's experiences. Another reason why as well, feminists who are anti-sex work or whatever, it's so harmful to the movement is because still to this day, the majority of sex workers come from marginalized or underrepresented communities, mm-hmm. right? That's the vast majority, to trans women, women of color, all of that. So again, what then happens is you then separate massively from like white feminists to feminists of color, whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's really important to have this discussion and to recognize it as an all-encompassing movement, and all-encompassing together of like, what are we fighting against? We're fighting against like not having similar rights especially in terms of pay. That's something that we can all get on board with. Mm-hmm. No matter what industry you work in, there's still a problem with pay. There's still a problem with treatment, right? Like, so we all of us, no matter what industry you work in, fear, things around sexual assault, where it's, disproportionate how it happens to women, and kind of wider systems and oppressions at large. And so if we get together and fight that together, it's going to be a lot more successful than if we start to divide it. And if we divide it, like I said, it's very harmful because of the other systems that are in place. You can't just talk about this world as if we live in a world that it's men against women. It's not at all. Like, we mm-hmm. live in a very patriarchal capitalist society is also very racist. Yeah. So we can't negate that. And that's why it's really about kind of coming together and fighting common causes to do with patriarchal capitalist societies as one.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that awesome explanation. I think it was really thorough for anybody who maybe didn't understand what intersectional means. And I remember when I first came across the term intersectional feminism, and I immediately thought, oh, well, that makes sense. It immediately made sense to me. I didn't have any resistance towards it. Or so I thought. And at the time I was, of course, I was like, of course we need to include anti-racism in the movement, and we need to consider class in those things. But one of the things that actually took me a while, which people might not assume, is my feelings around sex work. I didn't have super strong feelings around it, but I definitely judged it internally. And I think that that's extremely common. I don't know anybody who doesn't judge sex work, to be honest. We're humans, what we do, we judge things. I remember, I'm on my feminist journey, I'm reading books, I'm like, yeah, okay, intersectional feminism, yeah, that's me too. And then I remember one of my friends got into the porn industry, kind of out of the blue. Like I was kind of surprised. And I just remember judging her internally so hard, and that didn't feel good. I know it didn't feel good to be judging somebody, but I just thought, well, why would you do that? You don't need to do that. You can make money in other ways, and whatever, my arguments internally were. And as I was also on my journey of self-development and, doing some deeper reflection, I started to ask myself, well, why do I have so much resistance to this thing? Why do I judge something so much? And what I came to find internally was that I actually had so much almost envy of somebody who could feel so free and confident with their body and make money in a way that is unique and different. And I didn't have desire to go into that industry, but when I uncovered what that was, I started to deal with it. And then eventually I made an OnlyFans, and I still have my OnlyFans, but that was kind of like the path that it led me on, where I realized, oh, I do, where am I projecting my own shame, like my shame around my sexuality, my relationship with sex, my relationship with my body. I had what I would call like boob shame. Like I just didn't think that even though I had implants, I just didn't like my boobs. And so women who could pose topless or just like be so free with their topless body, I just had so much like projected shame on them. Like, how dare you be so proud of a body part that we're all condemned for? And also, I don't think mine is pretty too, and like that was how I felt. And so it actually, exploring my resistance and my judgment to sex work, not only made me more of an actual intersectional feminist, but it allowed me to start to heal that relationship with myself and start to really learn to love the parts of my body that we are, like I said, condemned for showing. And so with that said, did you ever have resistance with sex work or that aspect within the feminism?
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. I just loved what you said all around that. And thank you for this question. This is actually a really interesting question for me. I've been working in the nonprofit space for about 14, 15 years, mainly in human rights. How I first entered that was, I remember I watched it's so funny because how it's under the guise of feminism, right? But I watched a really meaningful film one time that was about the story of this girl who got sex trafficked. And then I was so like shocked, and it's like sex trafficking is a real thing and it's really awful. And I was so shocked by it and I was so appalled by it that then the whole of my like teenage years, I spent the whole time like basically doing charity work and doing anything I can to like stop sex trafficking. Like that was my biggest thing. I like created a whole art show against stop sex trafficking, all of this. And it was, yes. And then again, in my kind of like late teens, early 20s, I was very much like, this should be illegal. Like, like prostitution should be illegal from the point. And again, because I had my feminist hat on at all times, I was like, from the point of it exploits women, like, like you could be sex trafficked. Mm-hmm. And then actually when I, got a bit older and started like actually reading a lot of stuff and reading more into it, and I want to make a very clear distinction between sex trafficking and prostitution because they are totally different.
Completely, yeah.
But the way our society has done it, they've done it very cleverly. They've done it so that when you think of someone who is engaging in prostitution, specifically as that form of sex work, they must be sex trafficked, exploited, something like that. And listen, I'm not saying that there aren't. There are a lot that are 100%. But we never talk about it in a nuanced way. So it was only afterwards when I was doing, actually my whole thesis was around, my master's thesis was around the narratives that were constructed on purpose around sex workers, I chose Italy as an example because I'm originally Italian, but in Italy as an example, for a way to deport these women. And what I ended up happening, because I ended up interviewing quite a lot of sex workers in Italy through it, and I couldn't use names or anything, but a lot of them told me, oh yeah, we tell the nonprofits that we were actually trafficked here when we weren't, because otherwise if we say that we did this on our own volition, we'll get deported. So it's this really deeply entrenched issue that we have here where people, it's even in favor of the sex workers to be like, oh, well, especially the sex workers who are immigrants as well. Oh, well, I'll just, I'll get help if I say this. But essentially, it means that we've created this divisive society where we look at sex workers specifically as well, those engaging in prostitution, as either victims, like, oh, poor them. So they're victims again, which is harmful to a lot of women. Mm-hmm. And not the exact opposite of empowering, right? Mm-hmm. Or as in like, oh, that's disgusting, and like, oh, like they, what they're doing is like perverse, and it's like not okay, and it's not within our society, it's not within our values, and I have to say that it was actually through my study of it that I really kind of got into terms with it. I got in huge arguments with my supervisor because he was like, no, it's still, exploitative. And I was like, no, it's not. It doesn't the act itself isn't exploitative. And I had this huge realization where I was like, it doesn't mean that they're being exploited. So I guess my shame around, sex work wasn't ever around like, oh, how dare they do what they're doing. It was more like, oh, poor them, I must save them. Mm-hmm. I went through the victimization route of like, oh God, everyone who's in prostitution is a victim in some way, shape or form. Yeah. Like, oh, must do something to save them. Let's make prostitution illegal. But actually, so that was kind of where it came from, because mainly around that. I never felt like kind of like, oh, how dare she show skin. Like I've luckily never really had that. And I think it's because I grew up in a naked friendly household. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so it was more like, oh, poor them, I must save them. And actually, having that kind of 180 realization, being like, well, it doesn't matter, at the end of the day. I mean, of course it matters the way someone gets into a form of labor, but at the end of the day, if someone, if they're exploited in a way, shape or form, or if they do it on their own volition, it shows even more that this should be legalized with proper rights, employment rights, having proper systems in places, mm-hmm. so that they are protected. Mm-hmm. Because the issue right now is people saying, oh, it should be illegal, like you strongly should be illegal, like no rights, whatever. Then it's not going to stop. It's right. Just not, that doesn't, we've seen time and time again, most countries it still is illegal. It doesn't stop mm-hmm. prostitution. It doesn't stop it. What it does is make things extremely dangerous and precarious for the people engaging in it. Mm-hmm. So even more so, that's why I did this whole thesis on it as kind of a cultural like call for us to really accept this as a form in our society and to give really strong protection rights. Because then even the ones who are exploited to the point of just like, because there are a certain amount of people, in any industry, whether you're in sales or sex mm-hmm. work, there'll be a part of you that's like, oh, I'm just doing this job to make ends meet, to put food for my family on their table or whatever. Yeah. Either or, like, then if you give the proper rights in place, then they have the more of a choice of whether to leave that line of work and do something else, something that they maybe enjoy more, or carry on doing it in a safe way, whatever it is. That's the main issue here. And that's why feminism in sex work is so needed, because it needs that kind of protection mm-hmm. of the workers' rights, that kind of protection that's necessary. And it's just so funny, the whole kind of conversation of like all these people who are pointing to these women in sex work and being like, you're so disempowering and whatever. And it's like, okay, well, I don't find it very empowering to go to my office job every day and work in my cubicle from 9 to 5 and feel depressed at the way I'm living my life, right. It's what we need to expand the way we really, the way we really kind of think about empowerment. Right.
And the way we discuss this very kind of complex topic, because it is a complex topic. And I'm glad you brought up sex trafficking, because it's important to also note that when it comes to like sex work, all of the different industries, like, I was talking about porn, there's also prostitution, there's like stripping, that's also considered sex work. There is, just like with every single industry, there is a dark side, a very shadowy side to that industry, right? We know that we know when we look at like big corporations and we look at healthcare, we know that there's corruption, and that's with every industry. So when it comes to sex work, of course there's corruption, and that's what is often highlighted. When it comes to the porn industry, a lot of like the big porn companies are just filled with corruption, and that's why with social media and then websites like OnlyFans and Patreon and fans. Wow, there's like all these other ones. I can't even remember them. There's all these like fan websites, right, that allow people to create like their own like their own products. It's created more safety, more control, because it gives the sex worker the power of control of when they want to work, what they're comfortable doing. They're not pressured into doing stuff. They don't have to sign contracts. They can quit at any time. It's completely different. And like, I don't support like the big porn industry, and I know you feel the same way, because it is so like messed up in so many ways. But that doesn't exclude that there are like safer ways being made, at least when it comes to like the internet sex work industry. And it's important for people to just have that understanding that, when we say sex work is work, and it's important to include it in our feminism, we can say that, and we can also be like, and I'm aware that these big porn websites are really corrupt and I don't support them, and I really want those X-rated actresses to find ways to work and get paid in a way that's safe, and they're not being controlled or exploited by like the big companies.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, just because you're against an industry doesn't mean you're against the people.
Exactly. And I think that as people learn more, it's always education, right? A lot of people just don't know what. I just talked about this with Allie because we were talking about psychedelics in the last episode, and she said, you fear what you don't know, and it's really true when it comes to sex work. It's seen as so taboo, but it continues to exist, and it is the biggest industry, and it's important for people to have education about it so that we can protect sex workers, because it is real work, and it's one of the oldest jobs that women and marginalized people could partake in so that they can make money and survive. But whether they're doing it for survival or they're doing it because it's their own choice of empowerment and that's what they want, that's what they choose to do, whether they love it or they kind of like it or they just are doing it because they need to make ends meet, it's their choice, and it doesn't take away from the fact that it's an okay choice. I want to talk a little bit more about the other aspects of intersectional feminism as well, when it comes, because we talked about sex work. For somebody who's maybe completely new to their feminist journey, or maybe they've never heard any of this shit that we're talking about here, what are some other, what's the other big pieces to know? How can they make sure that they are going about their journey of educating themselves as a feminist and standing up for what they believe in without excluding the, trans women and other marginalized people?
Sure. Well, I would say if you don't identify as trans or you don't identify as a woman of color, then sit down and listen. Mm-hmm. Listen to those who have that experience. Understand that just because you're a woman doesn't mean that you may engage in white privilege, class privilege, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Really understand that and listen to what they're saying. Don't assume that you know what the Black experience for a woman is like if you're not a Black woman. Mm-hmm. You don't. Frankly, you don't. You do not understand what it's like to be a trans woman either. And so I think that's if you're cisgendered. So that's what I'm saying is really taking that, understanding your privilege and understanding that your knowledge is of being a woman is limited, mm-hmm. right? Most people's are to some extent. So understanding that, for sure, if you're a woman of color, but you're a cisgendered woman of color, understand that you have that cisgender privilege. All of this, and that's the important thing is to really understand and listen to the experiences of others, and that's how you'll never learn exactly what it's like, but you'll understand how to be the best ally that you can be, mm-hmm. and that starts with with listening and acting, for sure, listening first and acting second, and acting in a way and championing in a way of how they their other marginalized groups are asking you to support them.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important for people to have an understanding that as you're on your journey of expanding your mind as a progressive thinker and wanting to care about other people, it's just really important to, when you're listening, to remember that you don't know, like, you don't know what you don't know. And I always find it so fascinating whenever I've gotten into, and I'm sure you can relate to this, I've gotten into, heated discussions with people who, did they hear the word feminist and they're like, feminism is bullshit, whatever.
We're all one human race. It should be called humanism.
Yeah, please, or just like they get really, a lot of people can get really offended when it comes to class privilege, because they're like, well, I worked for everything that I have, and whatever. And whenever those kind of heated discussions happen, I just always find it fascinating, because I always think, well, you don't know what I'm even about to share yet, and you're so strong in your opinion. So I think it comes with also just opening up your heart and your mind to opinions that may be challenging to what you've been taught. And that's how you can really start to learn, and how you can just expand your mind so that you can be supportive of people who have had experiences that are different than you, more difficult than you, and you can help create a better world that has more equal rights for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. No, definitely. Yeah, I would agree.
Sometimes I snap for myself.
I'll snap for you, sister.
We talked a little bit earlier about this topic as well, not on the podcast, in life, because we talk constantly all day, every day via voice notes. And we talked about the challenge that we experience being, so we are intersectional feminists. We're also spiritual people. And sometimes there can be this very interesting conflict between those two worlds, right? The very progressive world and the world that is more spiritual and focused in self-development. And we're very deeply in both. So I kind of wanted to talk about that, because something that you and I talk about a lot, we talk about it on our Instagrams and in our coaching, is because we coach mostly women and non-binary people, is kind of owning and tapping into your feminine energy. This can be argued sometimes or resisted because of the conversation around, gender norms and like being binary or not. And so I wanted to open up that conversation a little bit as well, because I believe that there's room for all of it. Like I believe that, of course, I believe that there is room for people to have their gender identity, and also understand that it's not just you are feminine or masculine, or you have a balance of feminine and masculine energy, but you can also label those energies something else if those words do not suit your comfort, right?
Yeah, definitely. You can say giving, receiving. You can
yin and yang,
yin and yang, being and doing. Yeah, exactly. I think it's really interesting. I think it's really interesting how it's so many discussions, they're really considered very separate, and I don't see it as that. I don't see it as them being like separate, like the kind of spiritual world of energetics and essences and all of this, and then the world of social justice at all, because I think both of them are constrained by our hyper-capitalist patriarchal society in which we live in. Because essentially in our society that we've lived in the human world, less of the spiritual world, in the human world, we prioritize consistently our masculine, right? Our masculine energies, and that's what we're told, right? We're told to get up, go to work, do this, do that, work out, blah blah blah. It's all about the doing. You know, we're not told from,
which is also yang.
Yeah, the yang. We're not told about, hey, you know, what's really important is rest and meditation and reflection, listening, breathing, just being in your essence is equally important. We're not told that. That's not what our emphasis is on. And so what essentially it is, and you know, I can really understand that people can feel jarred by things like masculine and feminine energy, because then it feels like, oh, well, we're getting away from this idea that we live in a, you know, binary society, because we don't, obviously. But it's also just understanding that all those are energies and essences that exist in absolutely everyone, whether you're cisgendered male, whether you're a trans female, whether you are non-binary, whatever it is, you'll have those energies and those essences in you. Like, yes, returning to the feminine literally just means the ability to kind of feel into those spaces, which are a lot more about the receiving and the being in our society, of which is so suppressed. Like, but obviously I love my masculine essences, and you know, even though I identify as a cisgendered woman, I still have a lot of very strong masculine qualities which I really love and have got me where I am today in so many ways, right? My critical thinking, my action oriented brain, all of that. So I want to recognize that I do understand how it can be jarring, and I find the biggest issue is when it comes to people who don't wish to educate themselves on the topic, right? So some people will just straight up be, you know, I think the worry is that then this creates, for people who don't understand or aren't full allies yet of the womanist feminist movement, will then be like, okay, yeah, great, see, so women should be feminine, men should be masculine, that's it, like full stop, whatever, that's it. And it's that's that, I understand that concern very heavily, but it's also about, you know, these are just kind of essences, and these are also essences and energies. I want to talk about their historical importance as well, and it's not made up by white people. It's a very indigenous terminology that is used here, and so understanding that, and you know, understanding the core essence of it. But yes, like, if it's still very jarring, there are so many other words that you can use with it, but all it in essence means is kind of balancing it out. And in the way that they're so connected, the spiritual realm and the social justice realm is still a big fuck you to capitalism.
Yeah. Thank you. And, you know, I like that you use the word essence, because I feel like essence is a great way to describe that, those concepts, because they're not these tangible things. And when we think of, you know, when we're talking about your feminine energy, we're not talking about getting your hair done and putting on makeup and a dress. That can be a outward creative expression of somebody in touch with their feminine or their masculine essence. When we're talking about the feminine essence, like you mentioned, it's the being, it's the flow, it's the create, and we all have these polarizing energies within us, and sometimes we can feel imbalanced in one side, meaning that we're leaning so much into the flow that we're not getting anything done. We're maybe, you know, behind in our work life. And sometimes we're too far in the other way, which is where a lot of us tend to lead, because of the way that our capitalist society has really worshipped this do hustle culture, which is very, you know, of the masculine or yang essence. You know, that's just like the structure. And when you're too leaned into that, you can experience burnout and just feeling out of touch with your essence of being and flowing. So it's important to honor both and to find balance within both. And they don't have to be, you know, they don't even have to be called feminine and masculine. That's the terminology that you and I use. It can also be yin and yang, yin being feminine and yang being masculine, or like you said, giving and receiving. I think it's important for people to know that, because like you said, no matter your identity, that it exists in all of us, and it's just all about finding that balance and celebrating that feminine or yin essence, because it has been so shamed and condemned for I don't know how long, generations after generations after generations. We've been told that we need to work, we need to be successful, we need to make a lot of money, we need to do, and that the essence that's softer and gentler and about resting and playing and being creative has been seen as lazy or
not productive,
unproductive, right?
Not good for economy, right? Mm-hmm. It's like the businessman is revered over the artist.
Exactly. So I think that just for people listening who maybe have never even thought of this topic before, it's something to just sit with and see where you're feeling like you lean more. Do you lean more into your doing and your action, or do you lean more into your soft flow? Do you feel like you have a good balance, which is great too? But they are both important. And as I also identify, I'm a cisgender woman, and I love to celebrate my feminine essence, and that's why I also love sharing that with other women, and we do that together with our Embodied Babe coaching, and we've been able to help women tap into something that they have suppressed and felt ashamed of.
Yeah, no, definitely. And especially when it comes to like body stuff, there's a lot of like shame around that. There's a lot of shame around tapping into your feminine essence, because we're seen as like, oh, well, if I'm not directly doing something or giving something, then what's my worth? And that's the beauty of the feminine essence, is it's kind of that returning to that unconditional, undying trust and understanding that our worth is our worth no matter what we do. Like simply breathing and we're worthy. And that's what's so important, integral of the feminine essence. And it's just such a beautiful thing that like everyone needs to tap into. And and so I think that the starting from there and starting from really understanding that that's what we mean when it comes to like the feminine and returning home, and also seeing that like the imbalance of both can show up in kind of ways which are not conducive to our alignment. So for example, if you're extremely imbalanced towards the masculine, you'll be much more feelings of control and manipulation and kind of just anger and like and you can feel really stressed out and everything. And for people who feel much more kind of imbalanced towards the feminine, it can be to a point where there's feelings of like depression or people pleasing, or kind of feelings of like not feeling that kind of ability to speak your truth. And that's why it's so important to kind of get into that balance where it's balanced nicely between the feminine and the masculine, and not only just the general feminine, but what does the aligned feminine look like? What is the resilient feminine, the strong feminine, the whatever feminine, like all these different kind of archetypes of what the feminine is and embodies. And
speaking of archetypes within the feminine essence, we have actually curated a retreat in Joshua Tree, California this June, and we are going to be doing just that. We have together we've organized different activities and activations to guide a group of women through tapping into that essence that they may be out of touch with, that they may have feared or have shame around, and doing it together in a collective celebratory way. And I'll put the link to the retreat information in the show notes. We only have a couple spaces available. We're already more than halfway filled up, but if that piques your interest and you enjoy hearing from us, definitely check it out, because I want to talk about some different tips and things that you can do to kind of tap into that feminine essence and celebrate it. But I wanted to just drop that in there, because if you hear what we're saying and you're like, wow, I'd really love to do that with Bianca MariaLuisa, you can in the desert. So check the show notes for that.
In a luxurious place in the desert.
Yeah, in a luxurious house. It's going to be epic. We're so excited for that. If you want to come dance with us in the desert, then check that out. But
And do deep healing as well.
Yeah, lots of deep healing.
Well, the dancing is part of the deep healing because we're going to do a lot of somatic embodiment movement, which will really be helpful.
Yes, I'm so excited for it. And on that note, I want to talk a little bit about what people can do when they're feeling out of touch. Or I guess maybe the first thing would be how to recognize that you're out of touch with your with your feminine or with your yin, however you prefer to look at that side of your energetic essence. Starting with, like you said, shame around your body. If you're experiencing shame around your body, shame around your sexuality, and this goes for all genders. This is for everybody. Yeah. If you're experiencing that, that's also a sign. What are some that you would note?
Yes. So yeah, definitely a lot of shame around body, shame around sex, shame around productivity. So if you feel as though, oh, I'm not being productive enough, or I need to plan out my day, and like obviously plan and structure is so important, but to the point where you feel shame going off the plan when your body's telling you to do something else can show that you're kind of very balanced in your masculine. Mm-hmm. The need for control, if you feel like you have this inner need to control every single situation that you're in, or most situations, mm-hmm. controlling at work, controlling your friendships, controlling your relationships, that can also be a sign that you're kind of not with flow. Mm-hmm. That kind of the control comes from a deep distrust of that everything's going to work out. So mm-hmm. that's the beauty about coming back to the feminine and recognizing that feminine in you is recognizing that, and really not just believing that the universe works in your favor at all times, but feeling that mm-hmm. When you're not prioritizing things like meditation or rest, or you think that stuff like rest and recuperation is a waste of time. Like mm-hmm. even if mentally it's not, but if you are acting in that way, if you're 3 p.m. and you don't have any meetings and you really want to take a nap, but you're like, no, I can't because of this. Mm-hmm. Again, that can show an imbalance. And I think it's really interesting here because it really does tie in with how important feminism is, because we've grown up in this hyper-patriarchal society. What will tend to happen is that a lot of women then they're not with the way the way that different things are prioritized. It shows that we are, we should technically be working all the time, but then also don't speak up with this because your worth isn't as important as a man's, and don't speak your truth because that's going to jar men, and don't do that because men don't like that. And so we're kind of in this, like, we're discombobulated in this society to be like, well, I can't do this, and then if I do that, then I'm wrong, and I can't do that. And that's why, honestly, this feminism work has led me to working in the self-development sphere, because it started with me being like, God, imagine if like all women had the confidence of a semi-successful man. It would just be like, we would, or like specifically like a straight white man. Mm-hmm. Like it would just be, we would live in a totally different society, and yet we second guess ourselves and think too much and like overthink and overcompensate and all of this. Mm-hmm. And so those are all kind of signs to show that like perhaps there needs to be a little bit more balance. And even if in the retreat, even if you are feeling like, well, actually I feel like I prioritize rest too much, or I prioritize, I don't do enough, and I people please, and I don't speak my truth, I would really also urge you to think about the retreat in a way, because another thing that we do is we tap into the different archetypes. So the warrior woman knows when to act, right? Mm-hmm. So she prioritizes rest, but she knows when to act, and she fights mm-hmm. fights for what she believes in. And so we're going to do lots of these really cool activities that kind of activate you and activate something inside of you that turns on this kind of thing of like, oh, now I know. Mm-hmm. Now I know my calling, and the inner knowing and the intuition, everything as well as wrapped up in the witch archetype. So yes, so it's really kind of getting that balance on. It's not about kind of going the extreme of the other way, but actually just honing in on that balance. That's so important.
Mm-hmm. I would also add with, ways to know if you're maybe out of touch with your, with that essence, is if you are if you are projecting your internalized misogyny on other women, and first that starts with you identifying, what is your internalized misogyny? Are you judging a woman for her sexuality, for her expression, for the way she dresses, for how many people she's slept with, for her job, for what her role is in her relationship or her marriage? Are you judging her? And if you are, and you find yourself getting triggered by what you see when you're watching TV or meeting new people or scrolling on Instagram, that is a huge flashing neon sign for you to say you are just experiencing seeing somebody in touch with something that you have the availability to be in touch with, and you're frustrated, and it turns into this like anger or envy or upset, and it doesn't have to be that way. And that's one of the like best things that I ever discovered, is that if you are projecting your shame around your sexuality, or your shame around your body, or shame around your creative expression, or whatever that is, onto other women, you can work through that. It doesn't have to be that way. But if you are experiencing that, it's a flashing neon sign, and I would start to do some work around tapping into your own feminine essence. I've received a lot of messages from women over the past couple of years, and it goes like this. This is like a very common kind of theme of a message that I'll get in my DMs, where women will say, I used to really hate you. I would look at your Instagram. I never followed you. I hated how proud you were of your body. I would slut shame you. I would even complain about you to my husband or my friends about how much I could not stand this vegan girl with the vegan tattoo on her butt on Instagram. And then I noticed that they were watching me so much that they noticed that I would mention misogyny. And so they started to wonder, what does that word mean? And they started to just look into it themselves. And over time, they realized that what they were experiencing was I was just a trigger for them. And a trigger is just a teacher. A trigger is just a little flag post for you to look internally. And when they did, they discovered that the things that they saw in me, like whether that's me like dancing around my pole, being all sexy, or, posing in lingerie, they realized that they had that within them themselves. And once they activated it and they felt in touch with it, they were actually so thankful that they had that trigger moment with me. And so, the messages are nice. They're not like mean. They're like, I used to hate you, but now I love you, is pretty much how it ends. And I find that so fascinating. And so that's just shown me how powerful all of this is, because what these women who've written to me, and some have told me in person, have experienced is then falling in love with their body, being proud of their sexuality, using their voice more, speaking up for themselves at work, asking for a raise, starting to post more on social media and just like get their self-expression out there, quitting their job, starting their business. And it all started because they saw, me, and I was just a trigger for them.
I love that. I love the trigger as a teacher. It's so true. And that's amazing that your mere existence can trigger someone so much into their journey and their kind of understanding. And I think it's so important. Like, we used to do online group coaching courses, which were awesome. And part of our curriculum was internalized misogyny and how it shows up, and understanding that, because really you have to go within, like, and this is how the kind of social justice and personal development really kind of collide, because it's so important to understand that, yes, of course I can sit here and be like, oh, I remember when I was 20 and I was in a boardroom full of men and they didn't listen to my idea. And then my colleague, who's the same age as me, but a man, said the exact same idea. And they said, good one, Robert, we'll use that. Like, of course I will remember that. And that was a big moment of me in like understanding, like, oh, this is the reality and this is what misogyny like looks like. Or the fact, that, I've been sexually harassed, like, before. So all these things are like the key points of my misogyny, but actually and there's only so much we can do with that, because obviously it's out of our control, and there is a lot we can do about activism, speaking about it, making people aware, so important. But how we can deal with it internally is so interesting, and it's so important, and it's so great for the wider collective. Like, my internalized misogyny definitely came up when it comes to So funny enough, not so much sex work, but definitely sex. Like I would have this really weird, and it was very, very internalized, because when I saw other people doing it, I didn't get triggered by it. I wasn't annoyed by it, but it was me. Like I definitely, probably as a teenager, I will say that I probably judged people for being sexually liberated. But when I got older and understood more about feminism, I would be like, oh yes, like, you know, women should, you know, feel free and liberated with their sexual partners and all of this, and as long as it's safe and everything. But then in my head, I was like, but I won't do that because I'd made up this future husband in my head. And I was like, but I won't do that because, you know, I would never say this out loud, but in my head I'd be like, well, that's not what wife material does. Like they, you know, they're very conservative with their sexual things, but like you go and you do your thing. Like that's great. And I wouldn't really have much judgment towards them. Like maybe if there was something else that I would have judgment towards them, then I'd project it onto that too. I don't know. But it was much more like my internalized thing was like, but I won't do that, you know, as if like I'm better than anyone. So it was so ridiculous. And it was like over time that I realized like I've just made up this like person in my head who I'm trying to impress. It's not even a real person. It's like
that happened to be a man.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like made up this like future husband of mine who I'm trying to impress by, you know, not being sexually liberated and being very conservative with like partners and stuff. And it was so funny when I like realized that myself. It was like that was a deep thing of internalized misogyny, because I like didn't want to act in a way that wasn't desirable. I will say like desirable in the long-term sense by a man, which is so ridiculous
and so common too.
Yeah, of course.
It's so common. I've heard from a lot of women that they'll tell me, oh, I really want to start an OnlyFans or, you know, whatever. So just start like posting on Instagram, modeling. But then I'm afraid of dating. Like I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to find a man. I'm like, well, you're going to just weed out the shitty ones because you're the ones that are not educated on feminism, the ones that are not supportive of women being empowered in their sexuality in the same way that men are empowered in their sexuality. You know, you're going to weed those guys out. They're not going to be options. That's actually a great thing.
Exactly.
You know, it's been because I've been on my feminism journey alongside being in my relationship with Nimai over the past couple of years, and so it's been great to watch him grow and become more educated. But there has been, you know, times when I'm like, I feel really liberated in doing this thing, and he's like, it makes me feel something. And I'm like, okay, well, let's explore it and then have a conversation around misogyny. And it has, you know, his thoughts will change, his whole awareness expands, and he views things so much differently now. And there are so many men that are feminists, that are supportive of women fully expressing themselves, like, and being empowered and in who they are. And it's important to highlight that, because I know like a lot of my podcast listeners are women, and they might be listening to this being like, well, that's all great for you guys have partners, you know, but I can't do that, right? Because of like what you just said. I can't do that because my future husband, or, you know, they wouldn't like that. It's like, no, your future husband or your future partner is gonna love you because you're fucking awesome, regardless of if you sell pictures of your feet or not, or whatever. Whatever that thing is, you know. Yeah,
and like you said, I love what you said about weeding out. It just weeds them out. See, you had a problem with that. Not the one for me.
Exactly. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think it was a really important one to have. I know we could talk about feminism and feminine essence all day long. It's like something that we shared passion for, which is why we became best friends too, among so many other things. And I do want to remind everybody that we're doing a retreat. I mentioned it a little bit ago, in Joshua Tree. We only have a couple spaces left. But if you're interested in it, just go to the link in the show notes to learn more about it. It's going to be an amazing experience focused on a lot of the stuff that we talked about today, as far as tapping into that feminine essence and feeling empowered in it, and doing a lot of healing around there for some heavy shit you may have been carrying for a long time, that comes with, you know, living in a patriarchal society.
Yeah, the cool thing about the retreat is we're actually tapping into a lot of feminine, receiving whatever, energies that are very conducive to very deep healing. So we will be doing stuff like body movement in order to push out certain traumas in different areas of the body, breath work, meditations, sound healing, Reiki. Like these are all very strong, powerful feminine essences, because actually the feminine essence or the feminine energy is the one that is much more conducive to healing, because it's the one that is about being. And when we're in a state of being, in a state of rest, is when our body can start to heal.
Recover, yep.
Yeah, recover, exactly. So if there are things that you are wanting to heal from, things that you feel that you may have any trauma that's stuck in a certain way, both Bianca and I are practitioners in the space of, you know, healing. So understanding that this is a great opportunity for you to address this finally, but also because it's, you know, it's a curated retreat. You'll be with some incredible sisters, and for the women that have already signed up, like I'm really excited to meet them. I know you are too, and I'm really excited for them to meet each other.
Yeah.
Because I think it's gonna be really strong and really powerful, and to have all of that done and all that healing done in sisterhood as well. A big kind of like an undercover, but not so undercover point of our retreat too is we are so like strong and close as best friends. And we also at the same time see a lot of people really wanting that and being like, I really want a best friend, or I really want a sisterhood like you have, or I want this friendship that looks like this. Like, how do I get it? And so we're literally being like, well, here, we can help you speed up the process, because how you and I became so close was literally, we were like, I'm going through this. And you were like, I'm going through this. And then we were like, and then we were like able to like support each other in such a strong way. So we know for a fact that actually a big point of healing is a big point of creating that sisterhood is when you're able to heal together. Yep. And that kind of speeds up the process. So that's what I'm really excited about as well.
Yeah, me too. And just, you know, we talked about friendship a little bit in the first podcast that we did together. And when women can support each other in really vulnerable spaces, I mean, incredible transformation happens, and we're going to be there to facilitate it. But all of the women that are already, you know, enrolled, that are going to be there with us in Joshua Tree, are amazing women who are on their journey of self-development and healing as well. And I can't wait for them all to meet too. And if you're listening and you're like, wow, I want to be there, I might grab one of those last couple of spots, go to the link. And where can everybody find you if they want to see more from you?
Sure. You can go to the link, like Bianca said, or you can message one of us too on Instagram. My Instagram is just at MariaLuisa Ferro, as you will see my name in the title, little underscore there, because I'm not the only MariaLuisa Ferro in the world. So it's at MariaLuisa Ferro underscore. And yeah, come and have a chat. Since the last one, got so many messages of people saying, I really enjoyed your conversation with Bianca. This is what I learned about it. This is what I resonated with. A bunch of other international women who are like, I'm German, but grew up in Iran and Zambia, and I related to your international story, or whatever it is. So tell me what you resonated with as well. I love those messages. I love to carry on the chats. I love to create the community as well that we can have online as an online presence. So yeah, that's where you can find me, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah. And as always, you can find me on all the platforms at Bianca Taylor M. And you can also go to my coaching page, The Embodied Babe, to learn more about our retreat and see the other things, because we're going to have a lot more things after this retreat. We're going to be having events based in LA. We're going to do retreats in other parts of the world as well. So if you want to keep up to date with what we have going on. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, I appreciate the share. If you share it on social media, tag me so I can send some love back your way as well. And as always, I'm sending you love and light. Peace.